Hey guys, how you doing? Welcome back to my Characters Explained series, where I cover characters from the game Battle for Neighborville, to ultimately decide if they're worth trying or not. And in today's video, we're covering one of BFN's new characters, that being Snapdragon. So without any further ado, let's get right into it. So before we discuss BFN Snapdragon, we have to rewind back to when Snapdragon was first seen in a franchise, which is PVZ 2. In this game, his gimmick is made pretty crystal clear. He breathes fire. It's not really too complicated in this game, so there's not much else to discuss. What's important is actually his first introduction in the shooter games, which was Garden Warfare 1. And if you're wondering how that's possible, well, he was a potted plant. Yeah, pretty underwhelming if you ask me. But still, he was one of the only fire plants at that time, so I guess that's gotta be worth something. But eventually, after being sidelined from the limelight, Snapdragon finally became an actual playable character in BFN. So, now that you have a decent understanding of Snapdragon, let's cover his basic stats. Snapdragon has the attack role in BFN, which means that he has to have some pretty good stats, and he does. He has 175 HP, and his primary, the Flameblower, deals 6 to 7 damage rapidly for about 7 seconds until it overheats. He also has a secondary that's similar to Chomper's Slobber Shot, which arcs like Yeti Chomper's primary from Garden Warfare 2. It deals 30 to 35 damage depending on the range and if it's a critical hit. This attack can also overheat, and it takes up to 10 shots to do so. So Snapdragon seems pretty good so far. And to add to this already pretty good damage, he also deals elemental damage, that being fire. Fire damage in this game actually works pretty differently than the first two games. It of course still deals damage over time, but it also stops dealing additional damage if the enemy is at 15 HP or lower. Now that's pretty nice if you ask me. It's still powerful, but it's not downright cruel like it used to be. So now that we've covered Snapdragon's basic stats, let's briefly discuss his abilities. The first ability is Swoop Slam, which lets Snapdragon leap into the air for a brief moment, then swooping down at whatever is in front of him. When he lands on the ground, any enemy in direct contact with him is hit with 150 damage, and only 50 damage if it's near an enemy. I don't think I need to tell you how good this ability is, and it really shows how powerful Snap can be. Next up is Blue Blazes, which makes Snapdragon fire a large blue ball that tracks and follows enemies. When it hits said enemy, it'll deal 100 damage, and if it's hit near an enemy, 35. There's not much else I could say about this one, it's just pretty good. Though I'd recommend being careful with where you fire it, as an enemy can quickly avoid it if they're near a wall. And the final ability is Blazing Trail, which lets Snapdragon let loose a large firewall, no pun intended. This wall lasts for a few seconds, and it deals 5 damage rapidly to anybody within it. This ability is also pretty straightforward, so there's not much else I could say about this one. And that's pretty much everything you need to know about Snapdragon's basic kit. He's all around a great character, especially for crowd control. And like every other character in this game, he can always benefit from a few upgrades. So let's discuss them next. So Snapdragon is like a lot of characters in this game. He has good upgrades. And because at this point I've made it a trend to select 5 of what I consider to be the best of a character's upgrades, I decided to go with it again. So let's start with his weapon upgrades. I chose Excellent Accelerant, Radiate, and Coolant. These 3 were picked for very good reasons. The first, Excellent Accelerant, was picked because it forces enemies to stay on fire for 2.5 seconds longer than they would normally, and I'm sure you can understand how broken that is. The second upgrade, Radiate, was picked because it increases the splash damage of Flare Ball. And as for the third upgrade, Coolant, this one was picked because it reduces the overheat for both of Snap's weapons, and it does this whenever he ignites an enemy. And this isn't just some small reduction either, it's around 25%. Yeah, needless to say, this upgrade definitely earned its spot in this video. Now, let's quickly cover the other 2 upgrades, which are both for abilities. The first upgrade is Engulf, which makes Blazing Trail last longer, 10 seconds to be exact. It may not sound too useful, but if you're trying to capture or control a point, then this upgrade comes in great use. The other upgrade is Incendiary, which burns enemies that are near Swoop Slam's impact. It also decreases the refresh time for the ability by a second or so for every enemy that's vanquished. Again, this upgrade is a little situational, but I think it has its uses. So, now that we've covered 5 of what I consider to be Snap's best upgrades, let's dive into the final main section of this video before the conclusion, the builds. As always, I have to say that these builds are what I came up with, and if you guys want to use or tweak them, then go for it. So, with that disclaimer out of the way, let's get into some builds. The first build is an aggro build, with Incendiary, Coolant, and Rough Patch. Everything in this build helps Snapdragon get to the front lines more often, and from my experience, it can sometimes lead to a capture point being cleared. Next up is a little bit more of a crowd control build, with Engulf, Quake, and Campfire. I didn't actually discuss the last two upgrades in the upgrade section, so I'll quickly go over them here. Quake knocks enemies up into the air with Swoop Slam, and Campfire places a small blazing trail column on the body of every third Vanquish you get. So seeing these upgrades together, I'm sure you can picture exactly what this build is good at doing. And finally, we have an ability build, with Combo, Critical Blow, and Coolant. The first two are there to make your ability spamming, sorry, I meant ability usage, faster. And Coolant is there to make your weapons a little easier to use more often. So, with all of the information in this video, I think we can finally answer the big question. Is Snapdragon worth trying? Well, I would say yes, absolutely. Snapdragon is one of those characters that actually have a pretty decently high skill ceiling from what I've seen. And although that could be due to him being an easy character to play, I'd also like to imagine that his upgrades also play a part in that. So try out this character. He's fun for all skill levels. And with that, I think I'll end this video here. Thank you so much for sticking around until the end, I really appreciate it. And let me know, do you guys like Snapdragon? Do you not? Well, let me know in the comments down below. And if you're new around here and you like what you see, then drop a like, maybe even subscribe, and I'll see you guys in my next video. Peace.